Good morning and welcome to the third in our Peace and International Issues Committee series for this year. Our meditation this morning will be offered by the Reverend Rayron Gumbel, the resident priest at the Milwaukee Zen Center. I'm sorry. Good morning. And Rayron will take over now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. And I'm very honored to give the reflection this morning on this wonderful program about climate change. Shakyamuni Buddha lived 2,500 years ago. And though the times were quite different from today, people seem to suffer in the same way as we do and wish to get out of this reality. The Buddha was asked, "Lord, the world's end where one neither is born, nor ages, nor dies, nor passes away, nor reappears. Is it possible to know or see or reach that by traveling there?" Friend, that there is a world where one neither is born, nor ages, nor dies, nor reappears, which is to be seen or known or reached by traveling there, that I do not say. Yet I do also not say that there isn't ending of suffering without reaching the world's end. Rather, it is in this fathom-long carcass, with its perception and its mind, that I describe the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the way leading to the cessation of the world. The answer how to be liberated from suffering is not found somewhere else, but here in this body-mind. Usually I do not say much because as Buddhist, I believe in the power of silence. But today I would like to appeal to all of us, people of faith, to remember the basic insight that we all share of an ultimate aspect of reality that as humans we do not have direct access to, but that we are all part of. We come into this world as seemingly separate persons who are feeling alone and scared. However, now we have the opportunity to wake up to the truth and bring harmony to all beings. And I think that is why we're here. Climate change, nuclear threat, and all the other disasters that we have brought onto ourselves cannot be changed by keeping going in the same direction and looking for comfort in consumption. If we don't change our ways, we will be forced to soon enough. My prayer is that we may recognize our role in this ever-changing, interdependent world and find skillful, compassionate action out of love rather than out of fear. Hopes can be crushed, but faith can last through hardship. The faith in the ultimate truth of oneness. Thank you very much.
Andy, are you taking over?
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Oren. I'm the pastor at Christ United Church of Christ in Bayview, and I'm also part of the planning committee for these Tuesdays in March programs. When we settled on the idea of focusing on climate change for this series, we knew that at some point we needed to address the issue of water. Living as we do on the shores of Lake Michigan, we felt it was important to understand just how climate change might be affecting not only Lake Michigan, but all of our waterways. So we are blessed to have with us today two people who have tremendous amount of experience in this regard. We will be hearing first from Misbah Husain. Misbah is a water policy specialist at the Center for Water Policy in the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Sciences. Husain is originally from California, where he earned his bachelor's degree in environmental toxicology from the University of California, Davis. He went on to Boston College, where he received a master in social work. His academic career has focused on environmental science and law within the larger context of promoting social justice. Sounds like somebody right up our alley. Following Misbah, we will welcome Adam Tindall-Schlicht, who has been the director of the Port of Milwaukee since May of 2018. Adam oversees and directs all commercial operations of our port, which generates over $100 million in local economic activity each year. Adam received his bachelor's degree in political science from UW-Madison, and then a master's degree in public administration from American University. I could go on for quite a while listing the awards and achievements that Adam has received and accomplished, but I think we would all be better served if I simply turn our program over to our speakers. Misbah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that introduction. So I'm just going to take a second here to share my screen, and please let me know once you can see this. Can you all see the climate change in Great Lakes slide there? Great. Okay, wonderful. So let me reintroduce myself once again. So folks, it's so wonderful to be here. I'm so grateful for this opportunity and excited to speak with you all. And I hope that I can contribute something that you find interesting and helpful to this discussion. So my name is Misbah Husain. I'm a water policy specialist at the UW-Milwaukee Center for Water Policy. And at the center, my colleagues and I conduct legal research and policy analysis related to the most pressing water issues of our time. And most of our projects have a national focus, but being based in Milwaukee, we also like to pay special attention to the Great Lakes and the Lake Michigan area specifically. Now, I've been at the center for the greater part of a year now. And what amazes me is that no matter what issue we're working on as a team, be it water infrastructure funding, flood insurance reform, or even public access to beaches and blue space, climate change affects all of them. It's this ever-present puzzle piece that we always have to consider whenever we're drafting recommendations and tackling different issues. So today, I want to give you all a sense of how climate change is affecting our Great Lakes region. And the reason why I think this is an important talk is because while many folks might, accept that climate change is happening, take the threat seriously as a threat to, human well-being, they still think of it as a faraway problem, right? Oh, it's a problem for island nations who are at risk of sinking due to sea level rise. It's a problem for cities along the Gulf Coast like Houston or New Orleans, who are battered by hurricanes and storms, or for California out in the West, who's been experiencing drought and wildfires. But if there's one thing that the science is very clear on, it's that every region of the planet is being affected by climate change, and put in a different way, no region is unaffected and no person will be unaffected by the warming climate. So we best prepare ourselves and take it seriously, because that is the foundation of hope. So the context for my talk here, the outline for my talk here is that I'll begin by giving some context, brief overview of how climate change occurs, and then I'll dive right into what it's doing to the lake, the Great Lakes. What are the impacts on the physical features of the lake, and also the human communities that depend on it for their well-being. And then if time permits, I'll talk briefly about some legal opportunities that we have to improve the outcome for us. So let's start with an overview of climate change. So as you all know, climate change involves the gradual warming of our Earth's atmosphere. This occurs as a result of the sun emitting sun's rays, okay? Those rays travel through space and strike the surface of the planet and bounce off. And in doing so, they transmit a little bit of energy, a little bit of heat in the process. Now, normally they would go off into space and would not affect our climate anymore. But as the greenhouse gases accumulate, okay, these are chemicals that are great at absorbing heat, great at reflecting the sun's rays. They smack that ray back down like a pinball machine, right? And that ray goes back down and bouncing back and forth racks up that score on our global energy and heat levels. And so with this, we're not just concerned with this increase in temperature making us unbearably hot, right? Or making it impossible to live in certain regions. That is a concern. But where the real damage of climate change comes is in the disruption of our natural cycles that occurs all along the way during this warming process, okay? And I'd like to stress this is fact and not hypothetical. The IPCC, this is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, okay? This is an organization formed by the UN that's the leading expert authority on climate change, and they issue periodic reports talking about the science of climate change and the impacts that it's having on humans worldwide. And in August of last year, they released a report confirming what I said at the outset. There's been changes in every region of the planet, and changes like drought, extreme rain, and flooding, okay? This is a graph from that report, which you've probably all seen in some shape or form at different times. It's the hockey stick graph, right? That line at the top curving up, that's the temperatures that we are observing now, right? And that line at the bottom, this blue-green line here, that's kind of level, though that's the natural change in temperature. Okay, so we have deviated pretty far from the norm here. And that's the point of this picture here. Okay, so let's focus now on the Great Lakes. I'm from California and I went to grad school in Boston. So I've had my fair share of chances to see some really impressive water bodies. But when I was standing on the shores of Lake Michigan, driving up from Chicago to go to Milwaukee, I was floored. I had heard the term freshwater sea before, but sweetwater sea, but it did not sink in until I was on the coast, how massive this resource is. I mean, the scale of it was astounding. And if you add up all of the coastline, which I've done a crude job highlighting here, forgive me, you get over 10,000 miles of coastline bordering all of this fresh water. To put that in perspective, that's about 2,000 miles more than the entire western coast of the continental United States. So this is a major, major region. And this is what has enabled communities all along this coast, right, big and small, to grow and thrive, okay? And they're all, the well-being of all of these communities is tied to the well-being of the lake. So that sets the stage a little bit here. So let's talk about the physical changes. We see changes in many areas, and I've grouped them into three categories here. Again, there's some overlap between the three, but I think this is still a useful tool. So we see changes in lake levels, we see changes in the average temperature of the waters of the lakes, and we see changes in the weather events, the increased extreme weather events that we see as a result of climate change. So let's start by talking about lake levels. And another term for the lake level can be the water balance. And I like this term because a good way to conceptualize this and think about this is thinking of the Great Lakes like a giant checking account, right? You have a checking account with a certain balance. And the way you figure that out is you think about how much money you've deposited into the checking account and how much you've withdrawn from the checking account, right? In this context, right, the deposits that we're making into the Great Lakes checking account take the form of precipitation, rain, snowfall, a runoff as ice melts, and the withdrawals from that account take the form of evaporation or consumption, taking water, using it, and not returning it to the watershed. Okay. And, just like a normal checking account, that balance is going to go up and down, right? Right around Christmas time, you're going to be spending money on a lot of gifts. It's going to be at a low, but when you hit payday, you have higher levels. So this is nothing new, this fluctuation. What we're looking at here is a chart from the Army Corps of Engineers that shows the changes in lake levels since 1918, all the way to 2020, but I've taken a snippet here from 63 to now, okay? This change is normal, but what we're seeing as a result of climate change is that this normal up and down motion in the water balance is becoming a bit more extreme. Take a look at the right side of the graph here that I've circled here, okay? In 2013, we had historic low water levels on Lake Michigan and Huron. And just 7 years later, we had historic high water levels. I mean, these were levels that have not been seen since record keeping of this data began in 1850. So it's astounding. Normally, this type of swing from high to low would take decades, but here we saw it happening in less than a decade. So very, very significant change, which is a sign of what's happening. Now, why is this happening? What is the mechanism behind this? Well, one of the things we can think about as an increase in that deposit that I mentioned earlier. And what we see is that in the past 100 years or so, all across the Great Lakes region, there has been an increase in the amount of rainfall, right? So the green areas on the map here, deeper green means more rain. And you can see there's a whole lot of green all over this, right? We have been seeing more and more rain and snow. And that means that when the high levels are high, they're getting even higher than before, okay? That's because the deposits are increasing. What about the low levels, right? That is due in part to an increase in the withdrawals, right? And we see that lake level temperatures are increasing. This map here shows changes in ice cover since 1973 up to recent past 2018, okay? Purple sections mean less ice cover comparatively. And you can see again, a lot of purple, especially on Lake Michigan. What is happening here is that as temperatures increase, the winters are getting shorter, and that ideal cooling period for that ice to form, that's getting shorter and shorter. What that means is less runoff when there would normally be runoff. And so you're having lower lows and higher highs, okay? So another withdrawal that we might be concerned about is transportation out of the watershed, right? In addition to these natural processes like evaporation. So say, for example, water transported to the Western United States as climate change worsens the drought. But this is exactly the kind of change that the drafters of the Great Lakes Compact contemplated when they crafted the terms of the agreement. So the compact actually expressly prohibits new or increased diversions, and that is a transfer of water from the basin outside to another watershed. So it prohibits this completely, except in just very small circumstances when you have a transfer to a straddling community or a straddling county, right? What this means is a transfer of water to Madison would be prohibited, let alone California. And so we don't really have to worry about this form of withdrawal very much, okay? Folks may be concerned in light of the recent Watershed decision, but that involved a very specific set of facts. See, the approval occurred because Waukesha was in a straddling county, its water need couldn't be avoided through conservation. The use that was permitted was limited to whatever was reasonable. And most importantly, any water withdrawn has to be returned to the watershed of origin, i.e. Lake Michigan, right? So for these reasons, the compact is quite strong and is going to protect against any withdrawals out of the watershed here as a result of climate change, but barring an act of Congress that's signed by the president. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as a common concern. So let's sum up, right? In the past, we've seen changes in lake levels, variations over time that were slow, barely imperceptible, right? And in the present, we're seeing higher highs, lower lows, and this change over compressed time frame. In the future, it's not clear if this will continue, but this is what we're seeing now. What are the consequences of this? So when you have high levels, right, we see damage to structures due to flooding, extreme, wave height and force hitting structures along the coast, and that causes beach erosion. And when we see low water levels in the lake, we have disruptions to navigation and shipping and dry docks and harbors, something I think my co-panelists can speak about much more eloquently than I can. Let's see a little bit more about how high water levels are affecting us. So erosion, the process of erosion occurs when a wave from the lake will come up to the shoreline and strike it. That is pretty forceful, right? But it also causes issues when the wave recedes. It's kind of clawing back any material that's on the beach there. And what that does over time is that it moves all of the fine sand that's on our beaches out into the depths of the lake where it can't be enjoyed by us. So this is a photo from Muskegon and Michigan from 2015. On the left, it's a stretch of highway that's got wonderful white sand. And then 2020, by that time, same stretch, completely covered with just rocks there. It can cause damage to structures as well. As I mentioned, here's a photo of erosion along a bluff, damaging a highway. Essentially, that clawing motion because of the high water levels eroded the foundation of this road and caused it to collapse right into the lake. And it causes damage in this way to homes as well. I'm sure many of you may be familiar with this. Here are some coastal properties that have been threatened by these rising lake levels and sent completely into the side of the lake here. So it's a really serious issue. Now, let me recap briefly. I mentioned temperature when I talked about storm cover. So let me briefly recap and say, we saw stable temperatures before, seasonal shifts up and down, of course, but what we're seeing now, again, increased average temperatures throughout the water, decreased cooling period, and decreased ice cover, shorter winters, right? And we're not sure if this will continue 100%, but if current trends do, we can expect to see shorter winters and less ice cover. What does this mean for us? Well, on the top right there, I have a picture of walleye, right? I've had a lot of good seafood, but my first walleye was something special, which is unfortunate because as Lake Michigan warms, walleye is a cool water fish. It prefers to be in a cooler temperature range. It can reproduce ideally in a cool temperature range. As the water gets hotter, either the fish die out or they leave the area to go to a place that's more comfortable for them. So in this way, we lose out on the joy of this type of cultural staple for us. It can be a threat to the economy and can disrupt other forms of life as well, right? It can make room for invasive species, things that we don't want in the lake, like the Asian carp or mussels to grow. And it also can cause what we call algal blooms, right? The hotter temperatures, the warmer lake water is great for this algae in the bottom right to grow. And the algae thrive in those conditions and they take up all the nutrients that would be used for other kinds of life. So this ends up choking all the other life in the lake and gives us this really nasty scum that we have to deal with in the bottom left. And on the bottom right there, I just highlighted, again, a reminder that these increase in temperatures are what is responsible for these changes in the deposits and withdrawals to the Great Lakes checking account here. Okay, so moving quickly on, I'll talk briefly about extreme weather. So back in January of 2020, we had a federal disaster declaration for Southeast Wisconsin, 3 counties, Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha counties, right? And this damage was severe. Initial estimates for Milwaukee County was $4.1 million in damage and about 30 million combined between the 3 counties. These were the initial estimates. And on the right, I have a picture of a Bradford beach, which was damaged in the aftermath of the storm. These high water levels were unprecedented, and they occurred despite the damage occurred despite the fact that we had some coastal buffering structures, break walls and whatnot. Because this change is happening at a rate and to an extent that we're not prepared for, our preparations are insufficient. So there's a lot of threat in that way. So again, just quickly summing up, in the past, we saw less frequent storms, less intense storms, but in the present, these types of storms, like we saw in January 2020, they're becoming more common, right, all across the country. And in the future, we can expect to have to foot the bill for all of this damage. There's estimates that over the next 5 years, Wisconsin will have to shell out $245 million to repair damage associated with these climate change related storms. I mean, that is no small amount here, right? And part of this problem is that our water infrastructure is insufficient, right? Our stormwater systems, wastewater systems, they're just not designed for this volume of water and this extreme weather, right? And because they're constantly being battered by some of these extreme events, they're rapidly aging. That's a problem because, that means more flooding. And in situations where you have combined wastewater and stormwater systems, that could mean backing up of the sewage systems into communities, which is an obvious public health concern, but also into our lakes again and our rivers, which threatens our drinking water source and other wildlife around us. So, investing in this is definitely going to be worthwhile moving forward. And so here's where I want to talk briefly about some positive next steps, some hope, right? We had our recent bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was historic, the largest single investment in infrastructure in history. And Wisconsin got a pretty nice chunk of money. $841 million were promised over the next 5 years to invest in our state's water infrastructure across all of these 7 programs here, but I won't go into the specifics now. And for this upcoming year, $142.7 million are available for these projects. So that's promising, right? That's something that is a really nice positive step. But like we said earlier, hope is not just about patting us on the back. I think it's really important for us to have a clear look about where we are so that we can know where we're going. And I mentioned the IPCC earlier, right? They had a very sobering report last month where they talked about the extent of damage that humans have already suffered as a result of climate change. And unfortunately, the folks who are most affected were the most vulnerable folks already. And in that report, a series of strong recommendations were made, right? In order to avoid the worst outcomes and most severe damage, they gave us a time frame of 10 years to act to have the greatest effect on the future, right? And part of that acting means 50% reduction in, I say fossil fuel usage here, but that should say greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, right? With a target of net zero emissions by 2050. That is an intense goal. I mean, that is a very short time frame, it seems like, and can seem overwhelming. But the good news here is that was also highlighted in the report is that we cause significant change to our environment. But this also means that we have a lot of agency in what we do moving forward. We have a lot of control. And this window, again, is the window of time where we can affect the greatest amount of change. So now that we know where we are, I have a picture here. This is my daughter. This is who I think about when I think of where we're going, right? When I think about the hope piece here, is that, looking at the situation with clear eyes can be a little humbling. But when I look at her and I think about the future that she has ahead of her, many, many young people and children like her, they can carry the mantle, they can move forward, and we can really, learn from them and learn quickly and act quickly to improve the future. So, sometimes this is all it takes to put everything in context and can rekindle that hope again. So that's why I put that in there for all of y'all. Excuse me, these slides, that was an older slide. So that's all I have for all of you. Thank you so much. I will cede my time. Thank you for everything and for having me once again.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Tindall-Schlicht, Director of the Port. Give me 1 second while I bring up my presentation, please. Can folks see my presentation? Thumbs up if you can. Yep, nope. Good. Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Adam Tindall-Schlicht, and I'm Director of Port Milwaukee. I'm also the current president of Wisconsin Commercial Ports Association, which seeks to educate and advocate on behalf of Wisconsin's commercial ports statewide. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today and to share a little bit of our experience in operating a commercial port during this time of severe climate change in the Great Lakes region. As we know, the Badger State is, the Badger State is home to 3 freshwater coasts: Lake Michigan to the east, Lake Superior to the north, and the Mississippi River to the west. Before I really dig in, I also want to acknowledge my co-panelist, Misbah, as well as the UWM School of Freshwater Sciences. They've been an incredible partner, and their commitment to supporting Milwaukee's freshwater assets is important for our work for generations to come, as well as for our livability as Milwaukeeans, folks in Wisconsin. I am grateful for that partnership and for the community effort to combat climate change. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to join this speaking opportunity is I really believe that our ability to address climate change is going to be accomplished by coming together, exchanging ideas, and discussing that path forward on how we can pass forward a world to that next generation better than how we found it. And here at Port Milwaukee, as a freshwater port, I know that we have a responsibility to not only grow commercially and recreationally, but we need to do so through the lens of environmental stewardship, sustainability, and coastal resiliency. Now, many on this call may know that maritime commerce on the Great Lakes is one of the most environmentally friendly methods that we have for transporting goods and freight to locations around the world. Ships are some of the most fuel-efficient way to move goods with the least amount of carbon emission. Now, port terminals like those that we have here in Milwaukee, along with all of the different ports along the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Great Lakes, are working together to further reduce the maritime industry's environmental footprint. Now, this includes efforts to invest in new ships and new environmental technologies on ships, as well as participating in new improvement programs like Green Marine, which Milwaukee is a longtime and very proud member. Now, Wisconsin is built to play a significant role in promoting environmentally friendly maritime shipping practices. And part of the way that we are doing that is by staying as active hubs for both economic, recreational, and environmentally friendly activities. These are just a couple photos of what it looks like to operate Port Milwaukee today. And what does that all mean? I mean, when we look at Wisconsin, Wisconsin's maritime economy supports thousands of jobs, creates $1.6 billion in economic activity annually, while also generating $240 million in federal, state, and local taxes every year in the Badger State. Now, it's equally as critical that we preserve and protect our freshwater resources for years to come, so we can continue to offer those family sustaining jobs that depend on our commercial ports throughout the state of Wisconsin. This is a major part of Port Milwaukee's story going forward. But part of what climate change is some of the major factors that are impacting our work and our ability to continue to serve our community. Look no further than COVID. The unprecedented nature of COVID required port authorities to modify their operations. We're going to move into the video. Oh, did you lose the video?
Adam, I think the sound.
No sound?
Yeah, no sound.
Sorry, I do apologize. We hope to show a video, but I'm just going to move on if that's okay. Before the end of today, I will put a link to the YouTube video. And in the meantime, I'm just going to continue on, and I do apologize. I believe I was talking about some of the challenges we've been facing since before the pandemic and as a result, and that continues on today. I mean, supply chain disruption, fluctuating weather conditions, which this was so eloquently addressed, and global trade disputes are accelerating all of the economic challenges that port authorities are already facing. Still, we have been able to move cargo. Now, this slide talks a little bit about Milwaukee's water history and how it's significant in the development of our state and the Great Lakes region. And I can tell you that from the beginning of the port's history to today, we're all about making strategic connections for our businesses and the commercial customers that we serve in the region. I want to go over some of these points because I think they're really exciting. Just to contextualize where we've gone, where we've come from, and where we're going in terms of Milwaukee's connection to the water, both commercially and recreationally. I mean, we know that settlers founded in Milwaukee because of water transportation, beginning with Milwaukee and the port's founding here in 1835. The Common Council in 1913 approved the acquisition of Jones Island. This is the port's current commercial center, again in 1913. Our rail connectivity began in 1921. Other highlights include Summerfest. I mean, the Port Milwaukee's land ownings go from the wind turbine in Bayview up to the steps of the Art Museum. Summerfest, obviously the world's largest music festival, has made its home on port-owned property since 1970. We're also the U.S. Department of Commerce grantee for the Foreign Trade Zone 41, and we've also seen a dramatic uptick in international cruise activity in recent years. On the commercial side, we are a landlord port offering diverse transportation and infrastructure solutions to over 20 commercial and recreational tenants. I mean, so what does this mean for those that don't work in the port world? Well, we are a vital transportation hub with a direct connection to both Canadian Pacific and Union Pacific, two of the 6 Class 1s that Class 1 rail lines that operate in North America. We're generally one of the most 100 commercially active ports in the country. Again, Wisconsin's second largest commercial port. New investment, new development is going to be key so we can continue fueling our economic growth while supporting the movement of additional freight in a sustainable way. Port Milwaukee and its shipping partners are committed to advancing solutions. This is a similar chart, similar to what Misbah was showing about how those water levels have been affecting our operation. Right now, we're sort of hovering above average, but again, that dramatic change from high highs 2 years ago compared to dramatic lows 7, 8 years ago has really been quite something to operate a port under. We need to advance solutions at Port Milwaukee and other commercial ports that are both economically and environmentally beneficial. So one of the ways that we are doing that is through the lens of coastal resiliency. It is a key consideration of port operations and strategic planning. The direct impacts of climate change on our operations are undeniable. Again, Misbah spoke to the January 11th, 2020 flood event, which caused over $2 million in damage to Port Milwaukee's international terminals and docks overnight. Extreme weather events like this, which are occurring because of climate change, are a key reason of why the port is making the pivot and has long planned for coastal resiliency and sustainability as a primary factor of our new capital asset renewal plan, a comprehensive approach which will allow current and future city leaders to plan for the port's operations over the next several decades. This is how we will manage substantial infrastructure improvements with a long-term strategy for asset repair, while also looking to coastal resiliency and climate change to make sure that when we invest in these assets, we are doing so in an environmentally sophisticated way, ensuring that public dollars are spent with a mind towards longevity given the threats of climate change. One program I wanted to highlight, and I'm just going to speak for another 2-3 minutes. We want to get into some questions, I know. One thing that we announced in late December of 2021, which launches this April 1st, is our new stewardship program. And I'm really excited about stewardship. This is a program in which any domestic or foreign flag vessel that comes to our port that has received significant environmental enhancements or upgrades will be rewarded for a part of the fee that they normally pay to the port for the handling of freight here. I mean, ship owners that operate on the Great Lakes are spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, enhancing their fleets over the last 10 years to make them environmentally friendly. Locally, we want to have those environmentally sophisticated vessels coming to our port. Of course, we are so proud to be home to the historic City of Milwaukee wind turbine, literally outside my office. I can hear her rotating as we speak. This is a 10-year-old wind turbine that not only allows the port to be climate neutral, but indeed we generate more energy with the wind turbine than we actually use. So it's become a net revenue creator for the City of Milwaukee and taxpayers, and that we're able to return unused energy at the port back to grid. Just to conclude things before we get into questions, couple fun and different projects that we're working on. Obviously, many in the news have heard that we are building a new $35 million agricultural export terminal on Jones Island. This is the largest one-time investment in Port Milwaukee's history. We are working to delist the Milwaukee estuary as an EPA area of concern, a federal designation which our water has had in the City of Milwaukee since the late 1980s. And that includes construction of a new dredge material management facility, as well as the long-awaited remediation of the Grand Trunk wetland. I also was really excited to participate in partnership with FedNav, one of our most important shipping companies, that donated well over 100 trees to our community last year, several of which were planted at the port. And most, however, were planted in the Menominee Valley. There was an arson event and several trees were burned due to an act of criminality. And our shipping partner FedNav replaced many of those trees that were burned. So really trying to look at both micro and macro ways to engage in the community and celebrate the port's role in stewardship. With that, thank you all for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions. And sorry about the video. I will put the YouTube link in the chat. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Tom Heinen. I'm the immediate past executive director of the Interfaith Conference. My successor, Pardeep Kalika, is the wizard of technology behind the scenes here, handling all of that, and he may choose to weigh in. We're at the Q&A portion. We'd like you to put your questions into chat. We will look for raised hands also, if you know how to raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. There is a button that you can use, but also enter questions in chat. Let me start off with one question, because in this series, we always look for ways that individuals can engage, certainly globally, but also regionally and locally. So my question to both of the speakers is, are there ways that the people watching this, participating in this, can interact with you in a positive way, ways in which their opinions can be registered, ways in which they can donate time or money? How can they help you make a difference? So Misbah, you went first before. So now you've got to go first this time too,
Great, no problem. So the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question is that, in the process of making the law, right? We have multiple branches of government, but the one that has been on the forefront of responding to, the concerns for climate change in Milwaukee is Wisconsin's Department of Natural Resources, the DNR. And so they make all kinds of rules pertaining to, things like pollutants in the groundwater supply and whatnot, but also things that might relate to the construction of structures to protect property along the shoreline, and issues that might be of interest here. Now, the public can get involved in that rulemaking process, and I can take a second to find it here and put it in the chat. But essentially, before any kind of rule or regulation gets passed, there are a series of public hearings and meetings that are required to be held by law, where proposed rules are posted and explained, and they invite written and spoken comments. And a lot of these meetings have been held virtually. So there's a calendar on the DNR's website that lists all of the different rules that they're working on right now, the different subjects, and when those hearings could be. So right away, I would recommend that folks look to that, just even for their own education, so they could see kind of what's being debated and be aware of what rules are being passed or considered, but also be heard and get involved there. Yeah, that's, I've talked enough for now. I can pass the torch now, but I can suggest some more things later on. But let me find that and put that in the chat there.
And one recommendation that I would add, so I briefly brought up the effort to delist Milwaukee's estuary as an area of concern. And this is a major $400 million investment to clean up our waterways after, really removing industrial muck from the bottom of Milwaukee, KK, and Menominee rivers that have been there for over 150 years. One way you can have immediate impact is by getting involved in the Waterway Restoration Partnership. This is a way that all of the city, state, federal organizations and community orgs that are supporting the effort to delist the AOC, we're looking for robust community partnership. We're looking for robust community feedback and participation. So that is one thing that you can get involved right now. But I do love Misbah's recommendation too. Not many people track the DNR's regulatory process, and it is by nature participatory. So keep an eye on those DNR files so you can see what areas close to your home are being considered for DNR updates.
I'm not seeing, there was one question in the chat which was addressed to some extent. I don't know if you can elaborate on it. It said, what are the plans that MMSD has to respond to the climate crisis? That's MMSD, not the Port of Milwaukee, but their relationships here. Anything to add to that?
I would just say, so for those that know, on Jones Island, Port owns and operates 80% of Jones Island. The northern 20% is MMSD's water treatment plant. Based off of my professional experience and personal knowledge of MMSD's executive director, their board, and their staff, I can tell you that climate change is, and addressing it, is a key element of their work. I would defer to MMSD itself to provide specific examples.
And most of you know MMSD is the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. I'm not seeing hands raised. If someone has their hand raised, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. In the meantime, I will throw another one out there.
Just real quick, Tom, I think Terry and Bruce got their hand raised.
Great, go for it. I can't see as well as you can on this, so go for it. Demute yourself, Terry and Bruce.
Yeah, this is Bruce. I'm inquiring about emergency disaster plans there at the port. And when I say disaster, I'm really talking more about industrial disasters. It looks to me like we've got a real mixture of tank cars coming in with flammable and explosive liquids, and some coming off of ships also, At the same time, those are very, very close to the tourist ships. So I'm wondering what the port's plans are for emergencies in the case of tank car explosions or other kinds of explosions with these very dangerous chemicals.
Great question, and one that I'm asked very, very often indeed. What I can absolutely tell you is that our operations, both via rail and via water, is heavily regulated by state and federal agencies, including the Wisconsin DNR, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard. Under the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 33 of the federal government, all port facilities, terminals, and operations are required to have robust security plans to not only look at the safety of the cargoes that we handle, but the safety of vessel operations, the vessel of truck operations, and the safety of rail operations. Perhaps the question that I get asked the most is with the safety of the operations of our liquid cargo pier, which loads and unloads barges and tankers that carry liquid bulk products. What I can tell you is, to the best of my knowledge, there has never been a major oil spill into Lake Michigan or Milwaukee's rivers as a result of the port's operations. And one of the things that I care very deeply about is making sure that we are a good steward and that our operations are at the highest level of safety and security. I will add that the state and federal regulators that oversee our work are incredibly diligent. I mean, all of our operations are not only subject to frequent ongoing declared and undeclared inspections. We have not had a major safety or security violation here in many, 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 many years. So I do appreciate your question.
There is two questions in chat. The first one is following up on Bruce's question. Do you expect to increase the shipping of flammable fuels with new terminals?
So at this point, we have two different tenants that are available to, are able to handle liquid bulk commodities. One of the unique ways that our port works is we're a landlord port, meaning that the terminals are not owned by the port themselves. We own the land, and then a private company. In the case of Milwaukee, we have over 20 private companies that operate at our port. So each of those companies has their own unique business development plans, which obviously we oversee and coordinate with them on, and again, in coordination with state and federal regulators. I'm not going to diminish the question, and I will say we know that Wisconsin has been operating under an energy crisis for over the last at least 5 years since the West Shore pipeline closed. So there is need, particularly in northern Wisconsin, for increased liquid bulk products. And I would venture, as I spoke to in my presentation, that delivery of those products via vessel is not only the most secure and safe, but is also the most environmentally efficient. But again, I can't really speak to the private business development plan of any port tenant that operates in that space.
Thank you, Adam. We have, I think Dean Muller has his hand up. Dean, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I think two of my takeaways, two great presentations. Two of my takeaways were that obviously climate change affects all of us. And the other thing is that the time frame that we have to do something about it is limited, 10 years, and to get to net zero. And one of the things that I've been working on is with others, we have a committee of 80 people. We formed Wisconsin for Environmental Justice, and the purpose of our organization is to bring together citizens of Wisconsin and organizations in Wisconsin to urge the litigation against the fossil fuel industry on the part of the state of Wisconsin, cities in Wisconsin, also counties in Wisconsin. There's currently 30 that have initiated such action. About a third of them are states, a third of them are counties, and a third of them are states. And I will put in the chat the website that we've set up for people to go to. And basically what we're looking for is people power to make a difference here. And this is just another avenue that we can use to influence the system, in this particular case, to get the attention of the fossil fuel industry. We're not looking to put the fossil fuel industry out of business, but they need to get serious about putting out green energy and not the other stuff. So thank you for the time to bring that up. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Dean. If
I'll
neither
jump
of-
in too, Tom.
Yeah, Pat, I was going to say, you have your hand up. So Pat is a member of the committee that helped organize this. So go for it, Pat.
And I'm also working with Dean, so this really is a great organization. So thank you. Wonderful presentations. I'm wondering, is there any chance that we can get more ARPA money to support the causes that both Misbah and our, I'm blanking on your name, I'm sorry, our Port Authority. Is there any way we can advocate for more ARPA money to support what we're discussing today? Thank you.
I'll jump in, and what I can tell you is when you look at not only the ARPA money, but I would expand the question and bring up the infrastructure money as well. So in the case of ARPA, cities and states received their own allocation. So the city of Milwaukee received a portion of ARPA funds. The state of Wisconsin received a significant amount of ARPA funds. And for those that are interested in ARPA related opportunities, I'll put it in the chat. Do look up or Google Badger Bounce Back. This is the administrative process that Governor Evers has created to efficiently and responsibly allocate states' ARPA tranche of funds across the state to address a variety of needs. So if you want to stay on the pulse of where those monies are going, and frankly, to apply for some of those funds, the easiest way is to register at Badger Bounce Back. I'll put it in. Infrastructure money, some of that's going to be direct transfer. But a lot of it is going to be competitive grant application. A lot of federal grant programs have received higher than usual funding for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 year fiscal years, federal fiscal years. So if you are running a small nonprofit, if you are interested in tapping into some of those infrastructure monies, the easiest recommendation that I can give right now, either hire or contract with a gifted grant writer. I mean, we are all going to be writing grants trying to get this infrastructure money for the next 5 years, and it's billions upon billions of dollars. So now is the time to invest in the most brilliant grant writer that you can find.
Thank you, Adam. And could Misbah have a shot at that answer as well?
So, unfortunately, ARPA is not something that I have very much experience with. So I default to Adam's expertise here. But I would just, have echoed exactly what he's said about the infrastructure bill funding. There has been talk about publishing some type of guidance or resources, from DNR or federal EPA to support people in applying. But that's still in the works and may take some time. These are really complicated processes, and if you can get an expert to help you with them, that would be good. But definitely, this is the time to try because there is a lot of money being funneled toward this purpose. So, I would just second that advice.
Thank you, Misbah.
I don't see other hands up right now. Let me ask a question that may dovetail with some of that, your reference to Governor Evers and then the allocation of money and application for it. The intersection of these environmental issues with our politically elected decision makers, to what extent is future planning now dependent upon action by the Common Council, by the county board, by the state legislature? And where do you see that interaction and the ability, key, let's say, tipping points, pressure points where the public's opinion needs to be heard?
Misbah, do you want to go first? I mean, you work in all tiers of policy analysis.
Yeah, if you can get your voice heard in as many points of power that is beneficial. Right now, there are so many opportunities for public comment on critical programs and tools that state governments, especially, Wisconsin state governments, will be using moving forward to try and craft their rollouts for some of this infrastructure funding. So I would pay attention to, federal EPA, if they're announcing anything or if there's tools coming out. There is one tool that they announced recently, which is a climate justice and economic justice tool that they rolled out recently, that they're soliciting feedback on. And the reason that this is very, very important is because you may have recalled that early in Biden's term, he had an executive order where he talked about his Justice 40 initiative and channeling 40% of the net benefits of federal funding to disadvantaged communities, to folks who have historically been marginalized and would be the most in need. And these communities exist all over, in urban, suburban, rural environments, and in Wisconsin for sure. And they've been neglected in many ways. And this is a key opportunity to provide support to them. And so the reason that this tool is so critical is because this climate justice, economic justice tool that has just been released in its beta form is what is going to be offered as a model for states to use to even identify where these communities are in need so that they can give priority to those folks for funding. So this is a good opportunity to weigh in on what are they using to, what factors are they using to say whether someone is disadvantaged or not, right? This is a really, really key moment to make sure that, not only, money is obtained by the state, but that it's going to the right places. So, again, that's something that I can put in the chat as links to more about that resource and that opportunity. But in terms of points where you can make an influence, definitely keep an eye on federal EPA's developments like that, and any opportunities like the DNR rulemaking, public input opportunities that I mentioned earlier are really, really important during this time. And not to speak too long on this, but I will say that there are a couple of great nonprofits and organizations who are doing advocacy work in the judicial system. They're writing, recommendations and policy briefs on behalf of all of us, advocating for us. With regards to climate change. One of them is Midwest Environmental Advocates, which was the first nonprofit, environmental law firm in the state. It was actually, founded by our current director of the Center for Water Policy. They're doing a lot of really good work for all kinds of environmental issues, but climate as well. So I would take a look at what they're doing, because you can support them. They can target some of their efforts where it's needed most. And also Clean Wisconsin is another good organization that MEA has frequently partnered with. So again, I'll put links to everything that I've talked about now, because I know there was a lot of info.
That's great. Thank you. Did you have anything to add, Adam? Or
I did, because I heard a local question there specifically about Milwaukee's Common Council. And what I would just say, I do acknowledge at the onset that I am an employee of the city of Milwaukee, and I serve on Mayor Johnson's cabinet. So I do say that at the onset. But, I will say, as a voter, as a city of Milwaukee resident, I have been very inspired by Mayor Johnson's leadership in his current interim acting capacity as mayor, and how he has jumped in and called upon all city of Milwaukee departments to consider their operations and that the ways that we support the communities that we do, get locally or in the case of the port, globally, through the prism of stewardship, through the prism of environmental justice, and through the prism of racial equity. So though I do say it through the bias of, but he is my boss and my employer, as a voter, I have been very impressed thus far with Mayor Johnson's leadership and bringing to bear conversations about equity and justice, both racially and environmentally, into every city of Milwaukee.
Great, thank you. I don't see hands raised, but let me go back to a question that was entered into the chat about a dozen minutes ago. Are there plans to install more human scale wind turbines like the one shown on the city port property, not the giant ones once planned for the waters of Lake Michigan?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Misbah may know there are no current plans within the city of Milwaukee. I would defer to Mayor Johnson's Environmental Collaboration Office. They may have insight. ECO, a city of Milwaukee department, was responsible for the major new solar panel installation near the airport, which has been a renewable success story. So I would defer to ECO on that. To the best of my knowledge, nothing planned. And certainly I can tell you from a Lake Michigan perspective, no water-based installations at this time. The Port of Cleveland has long envisioned a wind turbine installation, which I believe was called LeadCo in Lake Erie, and that continues to be a work in progress and something that we will be looking at should that effort ever be completed to see if it is indeed a best practice that could be implemented in the Great Lakes, but very much nothing in the short term or the midterm, to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you. Adam had indicated previously that he would need to leave at 1. He is able to adjust his schedule and stay a little longer. It's 1:05 right now. There's one more, so feel free to leave, Adam, if you need to break away.
Let's keep going.
But there's another question here in chat. Are there any citizen science opportunities? Perhaps Misbah would be the one to field this one.
Not that I'm aware of, but certainly this is something that I can look into, and, I can make my, contact information available. I can follow up with folks on some of these, popular questions that I don't have an answer for. But yeah, that's not something that I'm sure about.
Schlitz Audubon and the Urban Ecology Center do work in that space, but I'm not intimately familiar, but do check out Urban Ecology Center if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I see Jack Murtaugh with his hand up.
Misbah, I appreciated both presentations, but you in your presentation talked about the Lake Michigan and the Lake Freshwater and how we deposit water into it by result of climate change. But I would like you to repeat, how is the water lowered? I noticed like we used to go in Door County and other places, it really was hurting them economically because the water was too low.
Absolutely. So it's, there's always a complex series of factors that come in here, but one of the main reasons why the water level is low in the low season and getting worse is because there is that decreased amount of ice forming, right? And that runoff that is generated when the ice melts in the summertime would normally higher that level. But because of that decrease, that is preventing that extra deposit from coming in during other times. Also, simply because the heat is increasing in the ambient air, that increases the amount of evaporation that you have. So that could also be contributing to it during the times where there would be low levels. So a mixture of those two forces. And yeah, I will say as well that, there are so many, it's as much as we look at the Great Lakes as kind of one isolated pocket for this presentation, right? Weather is global, and there could be, certain wind forces, cold air, hot air coming from different directions that influence that, cycle there. So we might see, changes in how low it gets in the future, which is why, there's some disagreement about where it's going. But as for right now, that's kind of what we're seeing.
Great. It is 1:08. We appreciate our speakers very much for their generous sharing of time and wisdom. Pardeep, did you want to weigh in with anything here?
Yeah, no, thank you, Tom. I just want to thank Misbah, Adam, Reverend Gumbel. I want to just invite everybody for next week. We'll be joined by climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe. And if there isn't any questions, I also wanted to go back to the video that Adam was attempting to play. I think it's a wonderful video from the Port Authority. And if we can leave out with that, I'm just going to share the screen.
That's great. Let me add one thing. Catherine Hayhoe is nationally renowned as a climate scientist. She has a book, Saving Us, a climate scientist's it's for hope and healing in a divided world. It's really the title for this series. So we encourage you next week.
And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all next week. Here's the video. Thank you, Adam, again. Thank you, Misbah, Reverend Gumbel, Tom, Pat, everybody on the committee, everybody for attending. Thank you so much. Hope you're all safe and healthy.
Milwaukee is growing and advancing. Our city, our infrastructure, our jobs, and our fun. At the heart of this economic boom is Milwaukee's bustling harbor. From shipments of steel for the Fiserv Forum support beams and salt for Wisconsin's winter roadways, to exporting Wisconsin-grown grain, corn, and soy, Port Milwaukee is the premier port on our nation's freshwater coast, moving goods throughout the Midwest and the world. Milwaukee boasts a rich history as a port city. Our waterways, once vital to connecting people to new frontiers, are now connecting people and goods across the globe. Port Milwaukee's 467 acres stretches along the coast from the footsteps of the Milwaukee Art Museum under the Hone Bridge to Bayview at the City of Milwaukee's historic wind turbine. The port's ideal location creates an excellent venue for its tenants, including Milwaukee World Festival Incorporated, producer of Summerfest, and Milwaukee's numerous festivals on Lake Michigan. Discovery World, the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Museum, which provides an impressive view of Lake Michigan and a distinct harbor experience, offering exciting recreational opportunities to cruise ship passengers arriving at Port Milwaukee's Pier, Wisconsin. Milwaukee's waterfront and its breweries, museums, and festivals, along with a fast-growing, vibrant urban landscape, makes this city a premier destination for people cruising the Great Lakes. In fact, Milwaukee is becoming a prime stop for international cruise ships on the Great Lakes, welcoming several cruise lines each year. These cruises bring thousands of visitors to Milwaukee, giving us a chance to show off our beautiful city and bolster our economy. Milwaukee's bustling harbor helps the city and entire region grow and succeed. The port supports more than 1,300 jobs, generating more than $100 million in economic activity, which creates more than $30 million in state and federal taxes each year. Port Milwaukee is great for Wisconsin.
Port Milwaukee provides an essential link for regional growers, producers, and manufacturers to world markets. Shipping cargo via the water provides cost savings, safety, and efficiency for our region's manufacturers, growers, producers, and farmers.
Maritime shipping costs less than moving freight via road or railway. Plus, it's safer and cleaner. An inland barge can move 1 ton of freight, approximately 647 miles, on 1 gallon of fuel, compared with 477 miles for trains and 145 miles for trucks. One Port Milwaukee company alone saves up to 1,300 trucks from hitting the road each year, meaning less road congestion and air pollution. The port's commitment to clean energy and environmental stewardship begins with its own wind turbine, which fuels the Port Administration Building and adds surplus clean power back to the grid. In 1 year, the surplus electricity created through the turbine generated over $13,000 in revenue for the city, as well as $6,000 in electricity savings for the region. Port Milwaukee's eco-friendly efforts also include recycling of industrial commodities like bottom ash and slag, decreasing disposal costs, and minimizing waste that benefits the community and nearby residents. The port's confined disposal facility remediates Milwaukee's urban water and can store dredged contaminated sediment. The CDF is creating new buildable land for now and for the future. Currently, that land is home to entities like the high-speed car ferry Lake Express, transporting people and cars across Lake Michigan in just 2.5 hours. Restoring marshlands and preserving park space is also a priority for the port. Milwaukee's smallest park, Kashub's Park, resides on port property and is dedicated to the fishing village of Polish descendants that once flourished here in the late 19th century. Milwaukee's harbor is at the heart of our city's rich history and continues to play a vital role in our region's vibrant future. A commercially thriving port with a great coastal town makes Port Milwaukee an economic and enriching asset to Milwaukee and surrounding regions.
Thank you so much. Beautiful video, beautiful shots of Milwaukee. Wonderful work. Thank you. And for everyone else,
Thank
we'll see
you.
next week.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Week.